that I had a rough scoring system. If you gave me a bibliography that was not annotated, instead of 100 points, I gave you 75. If, I don't know, there are a couple of other little hitches in there. And unfortunately, while I have them all graded, I forgot to enter them into the Blackboard grade book, so I'll give them back to you next week. I'll enter them in the Blackboard over the next day or two. You have homework due next week or the week after? Next week. Next week, okay. And 2 weeks from tonight you have a midterm, right? Yeah. Okay. An abstract is just that. Most abstracts run between 100 and 200 words. An abstract doesn't mean a rough draft of your paper. As I got to some of them, it seemed like I was being given a rough draft of the paper or an outline of the paper, and that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted an abstract. But if there was any question in your mind as to what an abstract was, you could have asked. Or looked at almost, these days, almost any journal. And on the front page of an article, there's always an abstract, and that will give you some sense of what an abstract looks like. You guys have any questions for me before I start cross-examining you? If all you give me is an answer, you run the risk in that the answer is not right. Okay? And then it's very difficult for me to say, oh, he really knew what he was doing, he just made a small mistake along the way. In this culture, we're not interested in just the right answer at the very end. We're interested in how you got there. So we like to see how you did it. But, in part, that tells me whether or not you really got it, or whether or not you got it from somebody else. Which brings me to another thing. University faculty these days are obsessed with cheating and plagiarism. And there are a couple of people in the department or the School of Business or the College of Liberal Arts that forward one newspaper article or another to all the faculty. Occasionally, my mother, who's an avid reader of the Wall Street Journal and other really right-wing news outlets, forwards articles about what an easy life university faculty have and what terrible cheaters all students are. Takes great glee in finding these things and sending them to me. And I read these articles and I think, and often they quote one faculty member at one school or another, and I ask myself, where in the world have these faculty been living for the last 10 years? Under a rock somewhere? What do they have between their ears? If they have to rely on some super duper web surfing software to catch cheating, do they know that little about their students that they can't distinguish between their students' work and work that was done by Paul Samuelson? And that's my overall reaction. My specific reaction is that it's very hard to fool me. So that if, for example, I asked you to tell me what, to explain simple correlation in your own words, and I read your own words in 5 out of the 30 submissions, and they're all the same, then I scratch my head and I say, maybe they have a common source for their own words. Or if the syntax and the grammar shifts between one answer, where there is no answer available on the internet, and another answer, which is like a definition that you can easily get from the internet, then I have to scratch my head and ask, well, who wrote, which of the 2 people that reside in that body wrote which answer? Regardless of what your native language is, you can always tell the difference between the written language done by somebody who was raised speaking that language and the written language by somebody who was raised elsewhere and learned it as a second language. So that's all by way of saying that when I say I want to read it in your words, I mean I want to read it in your words. And if you want to use somebody else's words, then tell me that you got it somewhere else and you thought that they stated the case much more clearly than you ever could, and therefore you're just going to cite their passage. You enclose it in quotes, or you indent it and do it single space with a reference to where you got it. No harm, no foul. That's great. But if you lift some text from somebody else and you don't give attribution, then that becomes a problem. So I'm just warning you to be very careful with this stuff. So those are things that are important to me, because as scholars, all we have is trust for one another. And if you breach that trust by trying to pass off what somebody else has written as your own, then there's an immediate problem. You're disrupting a trust-based system. So that's enough about that.